The golden edges of the contract shimmered under the chandelier's glow. The numbers printed on the crisp white pages were astronomical, a deal unlike anything football had ever seen. Cristiano Ronaldo sat alone in his private suite, the city lights of Riyadh stretching endlessly beyond the glass walls. The world outside was alive with noise, sports channels, online debates, breaking news alerts, all fixated on one question. Will Ronaldo sign the deal that will make him the richest footballer in history? Inside the silent room, though, none of that mattered. The pen rested near his fingertips, but his hands remained motionless. His jaw tightened, his eyes locked onto the papers before him, yet there was no excitement in them, no triumph, no joy. There was only doubt. A deal like no other. The offer had arrived with the force of an earthquake, shaking the foundations of the footballing world. A Middle Eastern club, backed by an oil-rich empire, was willing to rewrite history for one name: Ronaldo. A record-breaking salary, hundreds of millions, making him not just the highest-paid footballer, but one of the highest-paid athletes ever. A private jet, available at his command. A palace in the heart of the city, designed just for him. A fleet of luxury cars, personal staff, round-the-clock security. The promise of a legacy beyond the game, ambassador roles, business investments, influence. It wasn't just a contract, it was a statement. Take this deal, and you will be set for life. More money than you, your children, and your grandchildren will ever need. A rational mind would say it was the perfect offer. But Cristiano Ronaldo had never been rational when it came to football. The world holds its breath. As soon as the offer was leaked, the world erupted. Every major sports outlet had his name plastered on their headlines. Ronaldo's next move, football or fortune, historic offer, will Cristiano say yes to the biggest paycheck ever? End of an era? Ronaldo might leave competitive football for money. On Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, fans split into two armies. One side screamed, "Of course he should take it. He's 38. This is the deal of a lifetime. He has nothing left to prove. He's done it all. Ballon d'Ors, Champions League, world records. Take the money." The other side, furious. This isn't about money. It's about legacy. He should fight to stay at the top. If he takes this deal, he's admitting he's finished. Is that how he wants to be remembered? Legends of the game were asked for their opinions. Some remained neutral. Others, like Roy Keane, scoffed at the idea of Ronaldo playing in a less competitive league. "Ronaldo's a warrior," he said on live TV, arms crossed, voice firm. "If he goes there, that's him admitting his career is over. He's not that guy." The inner circle debate. Inside Ronaldo's close circle, the debate was even more intense. His agent, a man who had orchestrated some of football's biggest deals, urged him to sign. "Cristiano, this is generational wealth. The future of your family is secure forever." His business partners reminded him of global influence. "You'll own an entire market. You'll be bigger than football." His close friends, the ones who had seen him rise from nothing, had mixed reactions. Some said, "Bro, what's left to achieve? Secure your future." Others shook their heads. "This isn't you, man. You're still one of the best in the world. Why leave the battle?" But the voices that mattered most? His mother, his partner, Georgina, and his own conscience, the weight of a name. That night, Ronaldo sat with his mother in his mansion's dimly lit lounge. She looked at him, not as the world saw him, not as an icon, but as her son. "You have always played for greatness," she said softly, her voice trembling. "If you go there, will you still feel like the Cristiano I raised?" Georgina, sitting beside him, placed a hand on his. She wasn't pressuring him. She just wanted to know, "Will this make you happy?" The question cut through the noise, through the money, through the expectations. For the first time in years, Ronaldo didn't have an answer. The fire inside. That night, long after everyone had gone to bed, Cristiano Ronaldo stood alone in his personal training room. The walls were covered in framed jerseys, trophies, and medals from every chapter of his career. His first Champions League medal from 2008, the Ballon d'Or trophies from battles fought against Messi, the jersey from the night he returned to Manchester United, the roar of Old Trafford shaking the sky. His entire life had been about pushing limits, proving doubters wrong, rising when others counted him out. If I take this deal, is that me accepting that I'm done? He closed his eyes. In that moment, he knew. It wasn't about money. It wasn't even about fame. It was about what was left inside him. Did he still have the hunger, the drive, the fire? He looked in the mirror, sweat dripping from his forehead. And for the first time in days, he knew exactly what he needed to do. The pen stays down. The next morning, the contract still sat untouched on the table. The Middle Eastern club's representatives waited, their phones buzzing for a response. His agent paced outside the suite, waiting for a decision. The world held its breath. Ronaldo sat down, picked up his phone, and dialed. The voice on the other end answered immediately. "Mr. Ronaldo, are you ready to sign?" A deep breath. A pause. And then the words that shocked the world. "I appreciate the offer, but my answer is no." What was it that stopped him? Why would a man who came from nothing turn down hundreds of millions? The real reason behind his decision would soon be revealed, and it would leave the world in awe. A decision that brought back the past. Ronaldo put his phone down. The words still echoed in his ears. "I appreciate the offer, but my answer is no." The deal of a lifetime, rejected. For a moment, he sat still, staring out the massive glass window of his suite. The city lights of Riyadh twinkled in the night, yet his mind wasn't here anymore. It had traveled back in time, back to a place where dreams weren't measured in millions, back to a place where football was survival, not luxury, back to a boy with nothing but a ball and a burning fire inside. Cristiano closed his eyes, and suddenly, he was there again. The streets of Madeira, Portugal were narrow, uneven, and filled with dust. The salty ocean breeze mixed with the smell of street food, yet there was no warmth in the air. A thin, barefoot boy darted between alleyways, chasing a worn-out football. The ball wasn't much, old, stitched together, barely round, but to him, it was the most precious thing in the world. This boy was Cristiano Ronaldo dos Santos Aveiro, and at 8 years old, he already knew what it meant to struggle. The streets weren't just where he played. They were where he escaped. Escaped the hunger that gnawed at his stomach late at night. Escaped the whispers of his neighbors, who said his family would never make it out of poverty. Escaped the reality that his father, a kind but troubled man, was slowly drinking his life away. At that time, football wasn't about fame. It wasn't about money. It was about one thing only: survival. Because in Madeira, kids like Cristiano didn't get second chances. Their home wasn't a home. It was small, cramped, and falling apart at the edges. The roof leaked when it rained, and the walls were so thin that he could hear his mother crying at night when she thought no one was listening. His father, José Diniz Aveiro, was a good man. He had a big heart but a bigger addiction, one that drowned him bottle by bottle. Cristiano didn't know much about addiction then. All he knew was that some nights his father came home happy, and some nights he didn't come home at all. His mother, Maria Dolores, was the real warrior of the family. She worked as a cook and cleaned houses for rich families, scrubbing floors, washing dishes, saving every coin she could. Some days she wouldn't eat so her children could. Some days she would pretend to be full, even though Cristiano could see the hunger in her eyes, that hunger, that struggle. That is what shaped him, not fame, not wealth, not luxury. One night, when he was 10 years old, he overheard a conversation between his mother and one of her friends. "I don't know how much longer we can do this," his mother said, her voice breaking. "The money isn't enough. I can't give them the life they deserve." Cristiano clenched his fists. That night, he sat alone in his tiny room, staring at the ceiling, and he made himself a promise. "One day, I will change everything." One day, my mother will never have to worry about money again. One day, I will be more than just another poor boy from Madeira." That promise became his fuel. Every kick of the ball, every sprint in the streets, every tear, every drop of sweat, everything was leading him toward that dream. At 12 years old, he got the opportunity of a lifetime. A trial with Sporting Lisbon, one of Portugal's biggest clubs. But it came with a price. He had to leave his family, leave Madeira, leave everything behind. The night before he left, he sat on his bed, his mother beside him, running her fingers through his hair. "Do you really want to do this, meu filho?" she whispered. "It's the only way," Cristiano replied, his voice steady. She pulled him into a tight hug, her tears soaking his shirt. "Then promise me one thing," she said. "Promise me you won't let money change you." Cristiano swallowed hard. "I promise." The next morning, he boarded a flight to Lisbon with a single bag, a heart full of dreams and a fire that would never go out. The sporting academy was nothing like home. It was bigger, better, and more professional. But it was lonely. Cristiano missed his mother's cooking. He missed the sound of the ocean. He missed the only life he had ever known. Some nights he would cry himself to sleep. Other nights he would go to bed hungry because he didn't have money for a proper meal. But no matter how bad it got, he never stopped training. He practiced longer than anyone else. He ran faster, worked harder, pushed beyond limits, because he knew this was his only chance. At 16 years old, he got his first real shot. Sporting Lisbon played a friendly match against Manchester United. Sir Alex Ferguson watched from the stands, his eyes narrowing every time the ball found Ronaldo's feet. Within minutes, it was obvious. This kid wasn't just good. He was extraordinary. That night, Manchester United made the biggest decision in their history. They signed Cristiano Ronaldo. His life would never be the same again. Cristiano snapped back to reality. He was no longer that boy in Madeira. He was no longer that hungry teenager sleeping on the floor. He was Cristiano Ronaldo, one of the greatest footballers in history. And yet, his promise remained the same. He had sworn to himself, at 10 years old, that he would never let money define him. And tonight, he had kept that promise. The contract still sat untouched on the table. He wasn't rejecting millions. He was choosing who he truly was. "I am not done yet." The reflection in the mirror. Ronaldo stood before the floor-length mirror in his luxury suite. The contract was still on the table, untouched. He had made his decision. He had turned down one of the most lucrative deals in sports history. But as he stared at his own reflection, a question echoed in his mind, refusing to fade. Did I make the right choice? His own eyes stared back at him. The same fierce determination, the same hunger, but something else too. Doubt. For the first time in years, Ronaldo wasn't sure what came next. The world outside was still buzzing with the news. Social media, sports networks, pundits, everyone had an opinion. Some hailed him as a man of principles, a legend who refused to sell out. Others called him arrogant, foolish, unable to accept that his prime was over. But none of them knew what he was truly battling inside. The silence in the suite was broken by the soft creak of a door. Georgina entered, her expression unreadable. She had been watching him all day, waiting for him to speak. She walked up behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist. "You're quiet," she whispered. Cristiano exhaled, still staring at his reflection. "I don't know what's next, Gio," he admitted. His voice, usually strong, confident, sounded different tonight. She rested her head against his back. "You always know what's next," she reminded him softly. "That's what makes you, you." He closed his eyes for a moment. "Not this time." He turned to face her, searching her face for something. Reassurance, maybe. "Do you think I made the right choice?" he asked. She held his gaze, her brown eyes filled with something deeper than love. Understanding. "I think the only thing that has ever mattered to you is proving yourself. If you believe there's more left to prove, then you made the right choice." Her words settled into his chest. But did he still have more to prove? Or was he just running from the reality of time? That night, he barely slept. The doubts gnawed at him. So many voices, so many opinions, so many versions of what his next step should be. His agent had been stunned when he rejected the offer. "Cristiano, do you understand what you're walking away from?" he had asked, frustration laced in his voice. "I do," Ronaldo had replied. "That's exactly why I'm walking away." But was it the right call? His mother's words echoed in his mind, words she had spoken to him when he was just a boy, when he had left Madeira for Lisbon. "Promise me you won't let money change you." He had kept that promise, hadn't he? But another voice followed, the one he couldn't ignore. The voice of the critics, the doubters, the ones who said his time was up. Ronaldo is past his prime. He can't compete in top European leagues anymore. He's only playing for money now. His hunger is gone. Rage flickered inside him. Was that what they thought? That he was finished? That he, Cristiano Ronaldo, one of the most driven athletes in history, had lost his hunger? They were wrong. He got out of bed. It was 2:43 a.m., but sleep wasn't an option. He walked into his private gym, his sanctuary, his battlefield, the place where doubt died and belief was reborn. He stood before the punching bag, his fists clenched, the weight of the world pressed down on him. And then he swung. One punch, another, and another. The sound of his fists slamming against the bag filled the room. With each hit, a memory surfaced. That night in Lisbon, when he played with tears in his eyes, knowing he had left his mother behind. That moment at Old Trafford when Sir Alex Ferguson took a chance on a scrawny Portuguese kid with dreams too big for his small frame. That Champions League final, when he silenced an entire stadium with a single goal. His whole life had been a fight. Why should now be any different? He wasn't done. Not yet. By the next morning, the headlines had changed. Ronaldo rejects multi-million-dollar deal. What's next for CR7? Is Ronaldo afraid to face the reality of time? Where will he go now? Europe? MLS ? Retirement? He read every single one. And instead of doubt, something else burned inside him. Anger. Not the reckless kind. Not frustration. A fire. A challenge. A reason. They thought he was finished. They thought he was choosing money over football. They thought he had nothing left to give. They were wrong. So he picked up his phone, dialed his agent, and spoke with the same conviction that had driven him since childhood. Find me a club that will push me to my limits. Find me a challenge worth fighting for. I don't care about money. I care about proving them wrong. A pause. His agent hesitated, then sighed. I knew you'd say that. Cristiano smiled. For the first time in days, the doubt was gone. He looked in the mirror once more. But this time, he knew exactly what he was looking at. Not a man who had turned down money, not a man who was afraid of time, a fighter, a legend, a man who wasn't finished yet. His story wasn't over. It was just getting started. The weight of expectations. Ronaldo sat in the dimly lit corner of his suite, his hands clasped together, elbows resting on his knees. He had made his decision. He had turned down the kind of money that most players, most people, could only dream of. But the world wouldn't let him rest. Even though he had chosen his passion over a paycheck, the headlines were still loud, still relentless. Is Ronaldo struggling to accept reality? A proud ego or a wise move? Has Ronaldo's time at the top come to an end? The pressure wasn't just about football anymore. It was about his entire identity. And for the first time in years, Ronaldo felt the weight of his name pressing down on him. Not as an honor, but as a burden. For millions, Cristiano Ronaldo was a footballer, a hero, a legend. But behind the iconic celebrations, record-breaking goals, and sold-out stadiums, there was another reality, the business of being CR7. With sponsors, brand deals, and global partnerships, Ronaldo wasn't just an athlete. He was an industry. Nike, Tag Heuer, Herbalife, Armani. His name was everywhere. His face wasn't just on jerseys. It was on billboards, TV screens, magazine covers, even perfumes, and with all of that came expectations. A multi-billion-dollar brand that relied on him staying relevant. A team of advisors, marketing experts, and investors who saw him as more than just a footballer, but as a product. A pressure that never let him stop, never let him breathe. To the world, he was a machine, unstoppable, perfect, untouchable. But inside, he was a man, a son, a father, a fighter, and sometimes, even he wondered who he really was anymore. The night after rejecting the deal, he sat with his closest advisors. His agent, Mendez, leaned forward, his voice calm but firm. "Cristiano, we need to talk about the next move." Ronaldo rubbed his temples. "I know. You've built something bigger than football. You are football. But the world moves fast. If you're not playing at the highest level, people will move on." That hit him, not because of arrogance, but because he knew. It was true. He looked at the people in the room, men in suits, strategists, people who had helped him become more than just a player. And yet, in that moment, he felt completely alone. They were talking about his name, his image, his brand. But no one was talking about him. Not the kid who had played on the streets of Madeira. Not the boy who had left his family at 12 to chase a dream. Not the man who had fought, sweat, and bled for greatness. Just a brand. Later that night, he sat in the quiet of his balcony. The city stretched beneath him, but he barely noticed. Georgina walked up behind him, wrapping a soft blanket around his shoulders. "You're thinking too much," she whispered. He exhaled sharply. "I don't even know what I'm thinking anymore." She sat beside him. "You've spent your whole life proving yourself. First to the world, then to your critics, then to your fans. But I need to ask you something." She turned to face him, her hand resting over his. "Have you ever done something just for you?" The question made his chest tighten. "What do you mean?" "Every decision you make is about legacy, records, expectations. But if none of that mattered, if the world wasn't watching, what would you do?" He didn't answer right away, because the truth was, he didn't know. For as long as he could remember, he had played with the weight of the world on his shoulders. But was that really living? Or had he become a prisoner of his own greatness? Deep down, he wasn't afraid of losing money. He wasn't afraid of walking away from luxury or fame. He was afraid of fading, of waking up one day and realizing the world had moved on. He had spent his whole life chasing immortality, not just in football, but in history. He wanted to be remembered, forever. But what if one day people stopped chanting his name? What if one day someone younger, hungrier, faster took his place? That thought haunted him more than any missed penalty, more than any lost final. It wasn't about money, it was about purpose. Who was Cristiano Ronaldo? If he wasn't playing football, he had two options now. Option 1, take the easy route. Play in a less competitive league. Secure his financial future for generations. Enjoy life, enjoy luxury, enjoy everything he had worked for. Option 2, find a real challenge. Stay in Europe. Push himself to the limits. Prove that even at 38, he was still one of the best in the world. Most people would choose comfort, but Ronaldo. Comfort had never been his story. When the sun rose, something inside him had changed. The doubts, still there. The pressure, still crushing. But the fire inside him, stronger than ever. He knew what he had to do. He wasn't done yet, not with football, not with proving himself, not with chasing something greater than money. Greatness itself. So, he picked up his phone, dialed his agent, and with a voice full of certainty he said, "Find me a team. Not for money, not for comfort. Find me a place where I can fight. I want to win. I want to prove them wrong. One more time." A pause. Then Mendez chuckled. "I was hoping you'd say Tia." Restless night. Ronaldo sat on the edge of his bed, staring at his phone screen. The world outside was sleeping, but inside his head, a storm was raging. He had turned down the biggest contract of his career. He had rejected the easy path, the guaranteed riches, the comfortable life. And yet, even now, even after making that decision, something didn't feel right. Doubt still lingered. Had he made the right choice? Would history remember him as a legend, or as the man who didn't know when to walk away? The soft glow of his phone screen illuminated his face. His messages were flooded with texts. From friends, former teammates, journalists, analysts, everyone had an opinion on his decision. But he wasn't looking at any of those. Instead, his eyes hovered over a name he hadn't seen in a long time. Sir Alex Ferguson. His thumb hovered over the call button. Sir Alex. The man who had shaped him, guided him, pushed him when he was just a young, raw talent from Portugal. The man who had seen something in him when others doubted. The man who had told him all those years ago when he first arrived in Manchester, "Cristiano, you have the potential to be one of the greatest, but talent means nothing if you don't have the heart to match it." Those words had stayed with him. Because Ferguson hadn't just been a coach, he had been a father figure when Ronaldo had needed one most. Now, years later, as Ronaldo sat in his hotel suite, battling the biggest decision of his career, there was only one person he wanted to hear from. So he took a deep breath and called. The phone rang only twice before a familiar, deep Scottish voice answered. "Cristiano, I was wondering when you'd call." A small smile touched Ronaldo's lips. "Gaffer," he said, using the nickname the players at Manchester United had always called him. "I've been watching everything," Ferguson continued. "You've been making headlines again, son." "I suppose I have," Ronaldo said quietly. A brief silence, and then Ferguson's voice softened. "Tell me what's on your mind." Ronaldo exhaled deeply. "I turned down the deal." "I know. And now I don't know what's next." Ferguson chuckled softly. "Cristiano, you were never the kind of player who needed things to be easy. That's why I signed you. That's why I trusted you. Because I knew you would never take the easy road." Ronaldo closed his eyes, the weight of those words settling deep in his chest. "But what if—" He hesitated, his voice barely above a whisper. "What if I made the wrong choice? What if I should have taken it?" A pause. Then, Ferguson's voice turned firm. "Cristiano, let me ask you something. Do you want to be remembered as the best or the richest?" Ronaldo's breath caught in his throat. "Because let me tell you something, son," Ferguson continued. "Football has seen a lot of talented players, a lot of millionaires. But legends? They're rare. You think Pelé played for money? You think Maradona cared about his salary? Number they played because it was in their blood. They played because they wanted to be remembered, not for what they earned, but for what they did on the pitch." His voice softened again. "So tell me, Cristiano, what do you want your legacy to be?" Ronaldo felt something tighten in his chest. This was it. The real question. Not about money. Not about contracts. Not about sponsorships or marketing or business deals. This was about who he was. And suddenly, it all became clear. He had never played for money. He had never chased wealth. He had played for his family, his country, his love for the game. He had played for greatness, and greatness wasn't measured in contracts. It was measured in moments. The last-minute goals, the impossible comebacks, the trophies lifted under the stadium lights, the tears, the sweat, the battles fought and won. That was his legacy, and it wasn't over yet. Ronaldo tightened his grip on the phone. "Gaffer," he said, his voice steadier now, "I'm not finished yet." He could almost hear Ferguson's smile on the other end. "Good, because neither is your story." When the call ended, Ronaldo sat in silence for a long time. But this time, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt clear. He knew what he had to do. There would be no more doubts, no more second-guessing. He wasn't chasing money, he wasn't chasing comfort. He was chasing one last battle, one more challenge, one more chance to prove that age was just a number, One more season at the top, where he belonged. Because legends don't fade away, they fight. And Cristiano Ronaldo, he was born to fight. The very next morning, he made another call. This time to his agent. Find me a team. Not one that pays the most. One that will push me to my limits. Are you sure? More than ever. A pause, then a slow, knowing sigh. All right, Cristiano, let's make history again. And just like that, the future was set. The next chapter of Ronaldo's story wasn't about money, it was about legacy. And the world? It wasn't ready for what was coming next. A flight without cameras. For the first time in years, Cristiano Ronaldo boarded a plane without an entourage, without cameras, without the world knowing where he was going. No flashing lights, no reporters waiting at the gates, just him. Alone. Destination? Madeira. Home. The place where his story had begun. The place he had left behind at 12 years old, carrying nothing but a suitcase, a pair of boots, and a dream too big for a small island. Now, decades later, he was returning. Not as a boy, not as a rising star, but as a man searching for answers. As the private jet touched down, the familiar salty ocean air filled his lungs. The airport was quiet, no press, no fans, just the sound of the waves crashing in the distance. He pulled his hoodie over his head and slipped into the back seat of a car. "Where to, sir?" the driver asked. Ronaldo's answer was immediate. "Rua Quinta Falcão, Santo Antonio." The driver's eyebrows lifted. That wasn't a hotel. That wasn't a five-star resort. That was the street where Ronaldo grew up. As the car weaved through the narrow roads of Madeira, the memories came flooding back. The small, cramped house where his family lived. The dusty alleyways where he played football barefoot. The corner store where his mother used to buy bread, sometimes on credit because money was tight. It had been years since he had come back without the fanfare, without the expectations. But this time, he needed to remember. Remember who he was before the fame, before the records, before the pressure of carrying an entire legacy on his shoulders. And then, finally, the car stopped. He was home. The house was small, smaller than he remembered. The green paint was fading, the windows covered with dust, but it was still there. Ronaldo stepped out of the car and stood in front of it, his heartbeat slow, steady. He wasn't a global icon here. He wasn't CR7. He was just Cristiano, the skinny kid who once dreamed of a life beyond these walls. He walked up the front steps and knocked. The door creaked open, and an old woman with tired eyes peered out. She gasped. "Meu Deus! Cristiano?" A slow smile tugged at his lips. "Hola, Señora Pereira." She was their old neighbor. She had known him since he was a child. "What are you doing here?" she whispered, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Just visiting." She placed a wrinkled hand on his cheek, shaking her head in amazement. "Your mother would be so proud." His chest tightened. "I hope so." She let him in. The house had changed a little, but not much. The kitchen, where his mother used to stand for hours, cooking whatever little food they had. The tiny bedroom he shared with his siblings, where they slept on a single mattress, huddled together for warmth. And then, his old room. He stepped inside and felt the weight of the past settle over him. The posters were still there. Luis Figo, Rui Costa, a young Brazilian Ronaldo. The old wooden floorboards creaked under his weight. He walked over to the small desk where he used to sit and stare at the wall, whispering to himself, "One day I will make it. One day I will be the best." He traced his fingers over the desk. Would young Cristiano be proud of me? The question hit him like a punch to the chest. Not as a footballer, not as a businessman, not as a global icon, but as a man. Had he stayed true to himself? Had he kept the fire alive? Or had he let the world turn him into something else? He stepped out into the backyard where he used to practice for hours, shooting the ball against the cracked wall again and again until his feet ached. This was where it all started. Not in a stadium, not under the lights, not in a $1 million facility, but here, on this uneven patch of dirt, with nothing but a dream and a hunger to be more. He closed his eyes. This was why he had rejected the contract. Not for ego, not for pride, not because of what people would say, but because he wasn't done yet. Because if young Cristiano were standing here right now, looking up at him, he would want him to fight one more time. As he walked back through the house, Senora Pereira stopped him. "Wait," she said, disappearing into another room. When she returned, she was holding an old football. "This was yours," she said, handing it to him. His breath caught. It was old, tattered, the ball he used to play with when he was a child. "I kept it," she said with a small smile. "I always knew you would come back one day." He swallowed hard. The emotions threatened to overwhelm him. He held the ball, rolling it between his fingers. "Thank you," he whispered. She patted his arm. "Go do what you were born to do, Cristiano." And at that moment, he knew. As he got back into the car, he took one last look at the house. He had left this place as a boy chasing a dream. He was leaving it now as a man who had lived it. But one thing remained the same. The fire inside him was still burning. The world thought he had lost his hunger. They thought he was choosing money, comfort, an easy way out. But they were wrong. Because the boy who grew up on these streets, he wasn't finished yet. He had one last battle left. One last fight. And when he returned to the pitch, the world would remember why they had feared his name. The room of 1,000 thoughts. Ronaldo sat alone in his hotel suite. The night stretched endlessly, silent and still. The only sound was the soft ticking of the wall clock, each second echoing like a heartbeat. On the glass table in front of him, the contract still lay untouched. The numbers on the paper were absurd. Generational wealth, a lifetime of comfort. And yet, he couldn't bring himself to sign it. His fingers ran over the sleek surface of the pen beside it. A simple stroke, and it would all be over. But was that what he wanted? His mind flashed back to the streets of Madeira, to the conversation with Sir Alex, to the touch of the old tattered football that had started it all. He could still hear Senora Pereira's words. "Go do what you were born to do, Cristiano." He exhaled slowly. Was this deal what he was born to do? He leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. For years, his life had been about one thing, pushing forward. He had sprinted when others walked. He had trained when others rested. He had fought when others surrendered. It wasn't just about talent, it was about obsession. But now, for the first time, the world was telling him to slow down. You've done enough. Take the money. Retire. You've earned it. Enjoy life now, Cristiano. But something about those words felt wrong. Was that what legends did? Did Michael Jordan step away when they told him he was done? Did Muhammad Ali put down his gloves when critics said he was past his prime? They fought. And so would he. He ran his hands over his face. The weight of the decision crushed his chest. What if he stayed in Europe and failed? What if he was no longer the player he once was? What if the critics were right? For a brief moment, fear whispered in his ear. But then, just as quickly, the fire inside him roared back. Hadn't they doubted him before? When he left sporting for Manchester United, they said he was too young. When he joined Real Madrid, they said he couldn't handle the pressure. When he returned to Manchester United at 36, they said he wouldn't make an impact. And every single time, he proved them wrong. So why should now be any different? He looked back at the contract on the table, the easy way out, and then at his reflection in the mirror. Would he still recognize himself if he signed it? Ronaldo closed his eyes, took a deep breath. And at that moment, he knew. Knew that no amount of money could buy back the feeling of standing on a European pitch under the Champions League lights. Knew that comfort was a death sentence for hunger. Knew that if he walked away now, he would regret it for the rest of his life. He had more to give, more battles, more goals, more nights where the world would hold its breath when he stepped up to the ball. He wasn't done. So, with steady hands and an unshakable heart, he picked up his phone. The club executives had been waiting for his decision. When the phone rang, they answered immediately. "Mr. Ronaldo," the voice on the other end said, a hint of excitement in his tone. "Are you ready to move forward with the deal?" A pause. Cristiano's fingers gripped the phone tighter. "I appreciate the offer," he started, his voice calm. Then, with absolute certainty, he finished. "But my answer is no." The silence on the other end was deafening. "Are you sure?" they finally asked. "More than ever," he replied. And with those words, the world shifted. Because Cristiano Ronaldo had just rejected one of the biggest contracts in football history, and he had done it for something money could never buy. As he put the phone down, a strange sensation washed over him. It wasn't relief. It wasn't regret. It was peace. For the first time in years, he had made a decision not based on expectations, not based on fear, but based on who he truly was. He wasn't ready to fade away. He wasn't ready to settle. He wasn't ready to be comfortable, because comfort had never been his story. Greatness was. And the next chapter? It would be written on his terms. When the news broke, the football world erupted. Ronaldo rejects record-breaking deal. What's next? CR7 turns down millions. Is he staying in Europe? The king still has more to give. Social media was on fire. Fans were in shock. Analysts debated for hours. Rival players reacted with admiration. He's still hungry. He's not done yet. I can't wait to see where he goes next. And Ronaldo? He didn't need to read the headlines. He already knew where he was going. The world thought he had made his final move, that he would take the easy route, that he would let time decide his fate. But they had forgotten one thing. Cristiano Ronaldo never let the world decide for him. He was writing his own story. And the next chapter? It was about to be his greatest yet. He took one last look at the contract still sitting on the table. Then, without hesitation, he picked it up and tore it in half. Because legends don't retire. They rise again. Beyond the money, a decision that shook the world. When Cristiano Ronaldo rejected the record-breaking contract, the world was left in shock. Millions couldn't understand it. Why would anyone turn down that kind of money? At his age, why not secure the biggest paycheck of his career? What more does he have left to prove? But what they didn't realize was, this was never about money. This was about something deeper. This was about honor, legacy, and an unbreakable fire that refused to die. For most players, an offer like this would be a dream come true. Retire in luxury, play in a league where the competition isn't as fierce, live in a mansion, fly on private jets, and watch your bank balance grow beyond imagination. But Ronaldo wasn't most players. He had never taken the easy way out, and he wasn't about to start now. Because the moment he signed that contract, the world would have said, that's it, he's done. He's no longer a competitor. He's just another player chasing money. And that was something he could never accept. Because to Cristiano Ronaldo, football had never been about the money. It had always been about the fight. Ronaldo didn't reject the deal because he was arrogant. He rejected it because he wasn't finished yet. Because every morning when he woke up, he still felt it. The hunger, the fire, the need to push himself beyond limits. Because no matter how much he had won, 5 Ballon d'Ors weren't enough. Champions League trophies weren't enough. Becoming the all-time leading goal scorer wasn't enough. The world wanted him to slow down, but he still wanted one last fight. He still wanted one last moment under the brightest lights. Because legends don't fade away. They go out fighting. Somewhere deep inside him, there was another reason. A reason that had pushed him for over a decade. A name that had fueled him, challenged him, forced him to evolve into the player he became. Messi. Their rivalry had defined an entire generation of football. From La Liga to the Champions League, from El Clasico to international glory, it had always been about proving who was the best. And even now, with both of them in the final stages of their careers, the battle wasn't over. Because if he left competitive football now, if he walked away to a less competitive league, wouldn't that be like surrendering? Wouldn't that be like saying Messi had won? Ronaldo wasn't just playing against time. He was playing against history itself. And if there was one more chance to prove that he still had it, that he was still one of the greatest ever, he had to take it. Ronaldo had grown up with nothing, a small house in Madeira, a mother who worked long hours to keep food on the table, a father who struggled with addiction. He knew what it meant to be poor, and that's why money had never defined him. Because long before the mansions, the cars, the endorsements, there was just a kid with a dream and a football. And that kid didn't play for wealth. He played because he loved the game. He played because football was his escape, his purpose, his entire world. And now, decades later, that feeling hadn't changed. The numbers on a contract didn't excite him. But the sound of a stadium roaring, the thrill of scoring a last-minute goal, the feeling of standing on the pitch knowing he was still one of the best in the world, that was priceless, and that was something no amount of money could replace. Cristiano Ronaldo knew what people were saying. He's past his prime. He should just take the money and retire. He can't play at the top level anymore. And if there was one thing he had spent his entire career doing, it was proving people wrong. He had done it when they said he was too skinny at Sporting. He had done it when they said he would fail at Manchester United. He had done it when they said he wouldn't handle Real Madrid's pressure. He had done it when they said he was finished after leaving Juventus. Every single time he had heard the doubters, and every single time he had used their words as fuel. Now they were doubting him again, and once again he would answer them on the pitch. Ronaldo knew the world was watching. They wanted to see what he would do next. Would he crumble under the weight of expectations? Would he take the safe route? Or would he do what he had always done? Rise. So he sent a message to his team. Find me a challenge. Find me a place where I can still fight, still prove that I belong at the top. I'm not done yet. And just like that, the world knew. Cristiano Ronaldo's story was far from over. He wasn't walking away. He was coming back. And when he did, the world would remember why they had feared his name. The decision heard around the world. The world woke up to a headline no one expected. Cristiano Ronaldo rejects multi-million-dollar contract. Football world stunned. Social media exploded. Fans, journalists, football analysts, everyone had an opinion. Some called him a man of principle, a legend who valued the sport over money. Others called him delusional, unable to accept that his time at the top was over. But one thing was certain, this decision had changed everything. Cristiano Ronaldo wasn't done, and now the entire football world was asking one question: where will he go next? Across the internet, debates raged like wildfire. Ronaldo proved once again that he's not like the others. Football runs in his blood. Respect. Why would he turn down that kind of money? He's 38. Just take the deal and enjoy life. Legends don't retire. GOAT mentality. Messi took the MLS deal, but Ronaldo still wants to fight? Respect. He's not the same anymore. He should have just taken the money and left gracefully. It wasn't just fans. Former players, managers, and club executives joined the conversation. Zinedine Zidane, a man who had coached Ronaldo to Champions League glory at Real Madrid, was asked about the decision. Cristiano is not just a footballer, he is a warrior. If he says he is not done, believe me, he is not done. Wayne Rooney, his former Manchester United teammate, smiled when asked by a reporter. That's Ronaldo for you. He's never played for money, he's always played for his legacy. Rio Ferdinand, another former teammate, took to Twitter. Ronaldo doesn't care about money. He cares about proving people wrong, and I love it. Sir Alex Ferguson, his mentor, was reportedly not surprised by Ronaldo's choice. Cristiano has always been about challenges. The fire inside him is still there. That's why he's one of the greatest. And then there was Messi. When reporters asked Lionel Messi about Ronaldo's decision, he didn't say much. He simply smiled. Cristiano always does what he believes is right for him, he said. Let's see what happens next. But football fans read between the lines. Messi had already left Europe. He had chosen a new chapter in the MLS, a different kind of challenge. Now Ronaldo had done the opposite. And suddenly, the rivalry wasn't over. Because while Messi had taken a step toward retirement, Ronaldo had just declared war on time itself. The phone calls started almost immediately. Club owners, sporting directors, coaches, everyone wanted to know if there was a chance to sign him. Sporting Lisbon, his first club. Could he return home and finish where it all started? Manchester United, a second return? Unlikely, but the rumors still spread. Bayern Munich. Germany had never seen Ronaldo. Could he prove himself there? Napoli, Serie A champions, a club that admired him. Would he go back to Italy? Chelsea, PSG, Atletico Madrid, even clubs that once rejected him were now reconsidering. And then, there was one more rumor, a whisper in the football world. Could Real Madrid come calling again? When a journalist asked Carlo Ancelotti, Real Madrid's coach, about Ronaldo, he didn't rule anything out. Cristiano is a legend of this club. He will always be welcome at Real Madrid. It wasn't a confirmation, but it wasn't a no either, and that was enough to send fans into a frenzy. Could the king return to the Santiago Bernabeu? Could he wear the white shirt one last time? Could he end his career at the club where he became a god? It was a dream. But in football, dreams sometimes come true. While the world debated his future, Cristiano Ronaldo was already back to work. No interviews, no statements, no explanations, just a simple Instagram post. A photo of him sweating in the gym, captioned with 4 words, "I am not done." That was it. That was all he needed to say, because the world already knew. Ronaldo's story was far from over. The media could speculate, the critics could doubt, the fans could argue. But one thing was certain. Cristiano Ronaldo had just thrown down the gauntlet. He wasn't retiring. He wasn't disappearing. He wasn't taking the easy way out. He was coming back for one last fight. And when he did, the world would remember why they had feared his name. Because he wasn't playing for money. He was playing for legacy. And legacy never fades. The last walk before the next chapter. The world was still talking. Headlines, debates, interviews, speculation. Where would Ronaldo go next? But he wasn't paying attention anymore, because while the world focused on his decision, he was already preparing for the next battle. There was no press conference, no farewell message, no dramatic announcement, just a silent man, walking toward the only place that ever made sense, the football pitch. The floodlights were on, casting long shadows across the empty stadium. Not a match day, no roaring fans, no cameras. Just a silent, sacred moment between a man and the game he loved. Ronaldo stepped onto the grass, his boots sinking into the familiar softness. This was home. Not the mansions, not the luxury cars, not the business empire. This. The smell of freshly cut grass, the hum of the empty stadium, the feeling of the ball at his feet. This was the only place that had ever truly belonged to him. He bent down, tying the laces of his boots, a ritual he had done thousands of times. He rolled his shoulders, took a deep breath, and then he started to run, sprinting across the field, feeling the wind against his skin, hearing the echo of his own footsteps in the quiet stadium. His body still moved with the same precision, the same power. The world thought he was slowing down. But here, in this moment, he felt unstoppable. As he slowed his pace, memories flashed before him. A skinny kid in Sporting's academy, sleeping in a tiny dorm, dreaming of greatness. His first night at Old Trafford, wearing the famous number 7, the roar of the crowd shaking the ground beneath him. The nights in Madrid, lifting Champions League trophies, standing on top of the football world. The return to Manchester United, the emotion, the love, the weight of expectations, the goals, the comebacks, the battles won and lost. He had lived 1,000 lives within this game. He had seen glory and heartbreak, felt love and betrayal, touched heaven and hell, all on this pitch. And yet, He wasn't done. Not yet. He stopped at the center of the field, stared up at the towering lights above him, felt the weight of his entire journey pressing down on his shoulders, and then he smiled. Because he knew something the world didn't. They thought this was the end, but it wasn't. This was just another beginning. Because money comes and goes. Fame fades. But greatness is forever. And Cristiano Ronaldo, he was built for greatness. He turned, walking back across the field, his silhouette cutting through the golden glow of the floodlights. His decision had been made. His path was clear. And when the world saw him next, they would understand one thing. Cristiano Ronaldo was still here, still fighting, still proving, still chasing the only thing that ever mattered, his legacy. Because legends don't fade away, they rise again. And when he stepped onto that pitch for his next match, the world would know the king had never left.